In fact, the Conservative Party, who have led Britain for long 14 years, past 14 years, through economic austerity. We show that in the report, the Brexit, the COVID, and not to forget, no fewer than 5 prime ministers which were dealt with a devastating blow, with their number of seats falling from 371 to just 121. This has been their worst ever performance in almost 200 years, as published in some of the reports in UK. We're going to talk, in fact, take a greater look or a deeper look at this churn in UK polity, the Labour landslide win and the Conservative demise, so to say. And we are very, very glad and honoured to be joined by Mr. Adam Schwarz from London, and also Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, former senior diplomat, joining us on this special show. Thank you very much, Adam. Adam is the distinguished British writer and a political commentator. In fact, we would like to tell our viewers that Adam has also previously worked as a policy advisor in UK government's various verticals and institutions. Coming to you, Adam, first. Very precise but forceful opening remarks by your Prime Minister, setting the tone. Would you call it a nationalist tone when he starts by saying that rediscovering the UK's identity and the way he has presented such a compelling future vision, considering the challenges that he has, inherited from the outgoing Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. How do you see this big shift and big churn?
Well, I wouldn't say it was a nationalist sentiment, but I would very much say that it was a sentiment of unity. I think it was very much a speech that was designed to be quite modest in nature. He very much recognised the fact that actually, even though he's got a huge majority, that actually there were still major issues to do in terms of gaining public trust from government, because we know that actually, when there's a lack of public trust in government, it doesn't just affect the governing party, but in fact it affects public perspectives of all parties, really. And so that's why he was really trying to emphasize this concept of trying to understand voters, trying to recognize their fears that actually even a change in government won't produce better socio-economic conditions, which really led, I would say, to the Conservatives' defeat. But I think it was a very sort of well choreographed sort of presentation.
Okay.
We saw scenes that were quite reminiscent to what we saw in the 1997 election, when Tony Blair had a similar landslide victory, where we had crowds outside waiting outside Downing Street, not only waving Union flags, but also flags of all the other nations, so Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales as well. But really, Starmer as well also tried to set expectations, and he said that rebuilding Britain will take quite a long time. I think that's really important, because Starmer is someone who's had quite a cautious approach to his leadership.
Yeah.
Okay. And he wanted to make sure that any promises he made actually could be kept, and that's why this address really was kept to be quite modest.
All right. Okay, you're calling it modest. That's interesting. But talking about UK's fluctuating political trajectory, Adam, in the last 5 to 6 years, you've had 5 prime ministers since 2016, 3 in the last 2 years alone. But the question here is that, can Labour not only deliver on those promises, but we are also looking at more consolidation and continuity of power at the top?
I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, stability has really been the major issue in government, really, for the majority of this parliament, mostly due to the fact that we've had, changes in prime ministers, that we've never really seen before in just a single parliament. So really, that is the branding that Keir Starmer has tried to push forward during the election campaign. And of course, he's going to have to try to deliver that in government. But I think really the key question for Keir Starmer's policy objective is actually going to be what happens fiscally. Because of course, we all know that if he wants to make huge changes to public services and the economy, he's going to have to spend more in some areas. It's very difficult to do that unless you're making cuts in some areas, or if we're not borrowing more. So I think really that is the major area that's yet to be seen.
Beleaguered economy and fix those issues there. Adam, stay with us. Let me also once again welcome Ambassador Wadhwa. It's always a pleasure having you on the show, sir. Thank you very much. So, very predictable question. I think you would already preempt that. What does Starmer mean for India? What does he bring to table, considering that the manifesto clearly talked about FTA, and throughout the campaigning we could see that he's tried to rebuild the Labour's connect with the Indian diaspora, pretty much strategically. Your thoughts?
You're absolutely correct, because in the run-up to the elections, the Labour Party obviously was at great pains to explain the strategic partnership with India and the fact that there would be continuity in this strategic partnership. And besides the free trade agreement, the Labour Party has also talked about strengthening of ties with India in technology, in environment, in education and security. And most importantly, just before the elections, around the end of June, I think it was the 28th of June, when Starmer was in the Swaminarayan temple.
Yes.
And then in that, during that visit, he particularly talked about the fact that the Labour Party was particularly against any kind of Hindu phobia, setting at rest all the apprehensions, because in the past, as we all know, there's been some testy times as far as the Labour Party is concerned between India and the UK during their tenure. And that was sort of set at rest. And in the run-up to these elections, many times over, the Labour Party stressed that the strategic partnership would continue.
So this was in sharp contrast to the alienation we saw during their leader Corbyn over a perceived anti-India stance on Kashmir. I mean, they are now sort of refreshing their position in sharp contrast to what used to be their thoughts earlier vis-a-vis India. Ambassador Wadhwa.
Yes, well, during Jeremy Corbyn's time, particularly in 2019, when there was that particular resolution by the Labour Party, which talked about international intervention in Kashmir and a call for the UN-led referendum. And before that, of course, in 1997, when Robin Cook made that statement in Pakistan during a visit before the Queen visited India, about the fact that India and Pakistan would talk to each other to resolve the issue, and also offered to intervene. Well, that did not go down too well in India at that point in time. So we moved a lot from there, from that position. And we saw that after Jeremy Corbyn, we've had Ian Lavery, who was the new leader. And he set at rest all these apprehensions by saying that Labour Party would not be pro-Pakistan or pro-India. And thereafter, we've seen an equilibrium in the thought of the Labour Party going forward.
I would like to go back to Adam on that now. Huge task cut out for Team Starmer. Now your cabinet is in place and Labour is back in game after 14 years. So what do you make of the cabinet, and what do you think are going to be the cabinet's initial steps, priorities, top priorities?
Well, I think the cabinet virtually mirrors exactly Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet from the last few years. So there really aren't many two surprises there in terms of who is going to be in his top team. We have Rachel Reeves, who is the Chancellor now, the first ever female Chancellor, who's really been the architect of Keir Starmer's fiscal policy. So I think really, that is the fundamental issue at the moment for the government, is trying to create some kind of stability, but also crucially trying to get growth into a position where actually that produces the kind of tax revenue to try to drive some of the public spending programs that the government, I'm sure, would love to do. We have lots of other issues, such as immigration, which is a very controversial issue at the moment. We have Yvette Cooper, who's come in, who is actually one of the few people to come in who has previous government experience from before 2010 under the Labour Party. So she will be the Interior Minister. So she has a very delicate task about how to handle boat crossings in the Channel. We know that's a very difficult issue for the Labour Party as it's tried to win some of the kind of right-wing votes in the UK that have been very concerned about that. Other issues, I would say it's broadly, consensus with the Conservative Party, on defence, for example, very well aligned with the Conservatives on that and on Ukraine as well. So I'd really say at the moment, what Keir Starmer needs to do is to create some kind of aspect of stability and continuity and predictability for both voters, but also the markets as well.
I had that point exactly on my mind, Adam. The promises and all those to-do list, but then at the end of the day, the way Britain's politics has been panning out in the last 5 to 6 years, we are actually now looking at stability, continuity and more consolidation. And he comes, the party is back at the helm after more than a decade. So that's not going to be an easy task.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I think, again, the main issue is rebuilding public confidence. And even though he has delivered a huge, a stable government, it doesn't necessarily means that automatically delivers stable, public approval of it. But I think, the brilliant thing for Keir Starmer is the fact that he will have major authority over his own party, because he has achieved something that was extraordinary in that, only 5 years ago, the consensus was that it would take the Labour Party a decade to really get into a position where it could actually compete for power again. So, for the first time in a very long time, we have a prime minister who has major, confidence from his colleagues, which really empowers him to act, which empowers him to take much more bold actions. But I think we probably won't see anything too extreme over the next 6 months. I think generally, we will see a settling in period of stabilization. And I think really only at a later point will we see Keir Starmer with a second phase of policy that will be perhaps quite a bit more radical to what we're going to see over this initial phase.
Okay, interesting. Ambassador Wadhwa, do you also see some sort of shift now under the leadership of Keir Starmer, India-UK relationship? Are there going to be some big announcements, expectations, some game-changing promises made between the two? Or it's going to be diplomatics as usual?
I see more of a continuity in the relationship and building up on the strategic partnership. And I think it's most important to note here that both the Conservatives and the Labour have stressed upon the importance of the free trade agreement with India. Much of the work on that agreement has already been completed. So whichever party would come to power, it was expected that these negotiations would come to a fruitful conclusion in the nearest future. So that's one step that can be taken quite easily. Secondly, I think it's the involvement of the UK in the Indo-Pacific, and that's where Keir Starmer has talked about the involvement of United Kingdom in the region, which is also a sign of continuity as far as the British policy is concerned towards the region. And as far as India is concerned, that's also good news. The fact that Labour has been very strong in advocating climate change, and also they've laid stress on new technologies going forward and environment and education. I think all these areas are ones in which both sides are very keen to advance their relations. So I'm quite sanguine about a bright future for Indo-UK relationship.
Adam, I would like to have your thoughts on this point on dominance of Indian diaspora and the way soon the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has always reached out to the diaspora during the campaigning, as reiterated by Ambassador Wadhwa also. Major parties also fielded Indian community as candidates. In fact, I've been told a record number of candidates from Indian community have not only contested in these elections, but won these elections. Your thoughts?
Well, of course, the UK has a historic relationship with India that goes back, a very long time. And I'm really pleased that, of course, that, UK-India relations has really become a kind of point of political consensus in the UK that is very much based on the Indian diaspora in the UK, which has had such an extraordinary and profound impact upon the UK's economy in terms of contributions to its jobs and its culture as well. So I think that's really formed the basis for a sort of modern view about, considering India to be a major strategic partner, which of course, as you mentioned, Keir Starmer does, and he mentioned during his campaign. I think in terms of a trade deal, the one point of caution that I would make is that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have indicated that they may be looking to change the nature of the deal that the UK has with the EU. Now, if that fundamentally changes the way that the UK does its customs with the EU, that may impede on the UK's ability to unilaterally make trade deals with other countries such as India. So we'll have to watch that relationship quite closely because it may have an impact on India. But I would say that, even with that having been said, we know that the UK considers a trade deal with India to be a major strategic and, something that's crucial importance to UK foreign policy.
Okay. Ambassador Wadhwa, would you like to add to that? And final comments from you, sir. How do you see the shift in UK polity with Labour back in the game?
Well, I think I don't have much to add to what I've said already, but I think in terms of continuity, yes, there would be continuity, but there would be obviously some differences which could be there, as far as migration and mobility, for example, is concerned. and also policies with regard to the people who are going to work in the UK temporarily. That is one issue which was negotiated at great length with the previous government as far as India is concerned. And here there would be nuances which would be different. So I would tend to agree that there would be some issues that will crop up going forward in the FTA negotiations, which have been there in the past. But I'm quite confident that those can be quite easily overcome, because after all, as far as India is concerned, if you have a give and take in services, then I don't see a problem going forward in that, because both economies are mutually interdependent as far as services are concerned. And I think that building on the services side, investments will also go forward between the two countries.
All right, sir. Adam, last word from you. What are you picking up as far as conservative camp is concerned? Now, we believe that there's this battle already on to seize the leadership. Who takes it over next?
Well, what the Conservative Party needs right now is unity, but I think we're actually going to see the exact opposite, which is going to be fueled by the fact that the sort of hard right Reform Party has actually won 4 seats in Parliament and won about 16% of the vote. So, that is really going to fuel the civil war that's taken place in the Conservative Party, really since the 2016 Brexit referendum, about how far to the right to go. So I think there's going to be a major battle in the Conservative Party. And I think, it's really important for the Conservatives to recognise that they try to move to the right of the, of politics. And actually all that happened is that voters ended up voting for the real thing, the real sort of authentic, version of authoritarianism. So I don't think it's a strategy that will work for them. But I think, we're going to see a period of opposition for the Conservatives for a very long time, similar to what we saw under the Labour Party over the last decade, really.
All right, we'll leave it there. Many, many thanks, Adam Schwarz and Ambassador Wadhwa, for joining us. Adam joining us from London, former advisor to the UK government and very distinguished political commentator there in the United Kingdom. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, both of you.